Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
So I found this guy on Craigslist a few years ago. I like renting condos from private owners as opposed to renting apartments. Typically, by renting a condo, it's safer, you have more caring residents, you get to have a luxury apartment-style home with all the amenities, and you can negotiate pricing and so on. I'm an excellent tenant, and anyone who I have rented from will tell you that. I paid a $1,000 deposit to move into this guy's condo. I was on a year lease. He lives in another state, but we were in the same time zone. On month 8 of my lease, I came home to a door that wouldn't open. I couldn't get the door unlocked at all. I had 2 keys on me, and as much as I tried to turn them, I couldn't. One of the keys even broke in the lock. I waited 2 hours. I called, texted, and emailed my landlord, and he did not pick up. I thought maybe he had someone to change the locks for some reason. I honestly didn't know what to think and had no one to help me. The lady who lived across from me saw me in distress as she was going into her apartment. I had never seen her, but she asked me if I were okay, and I explained to her that I couldn't get into the apartment. She told me that she knows of an on-call locksmith, and she gives me his number. I tell her thanks and reach out to my landlord a few more times, but no response. I had no choice but to call the locksmith, plus I had to pee like crazy. The locksmith arrived and could not get the door unlocked with my key. He says he can replace the lock for like $100, and I told him I was renting a condo and couldn't get in touch with the owner and didn't know when would be the next time I could get in touch with him. After he took the lock off, he told me it was faulty, so he replaced the lock. I told the landlord this via email and text and voicemail and told him that I could send him copies of the keys if he wanted. Okay, so fast forward to the end of my lease, I demanded that he does a walkthrough with me. He said he wouldn't. I told him that if he didn't do a walkthrough, I would be notifying the condo office, as he did not have permission to sublease by the association. He then had a friend to serve as his proxy to come meet me and walk through the unit. The place was spotless. I know how to clean. I took multiple photos and videos and showed his proxy, who is a police officer by the way. I showed him the unit. Actually, they are both police officers who used to work together. We both literally tested all the appliances, faucets, checked the blinds, carpets, hardwood, and everything. His proxy gave me the okay and said that everything looked great. I gave his proxy the keys and later that night left for my new city. So fast forward to a month later, I haven't heard from him about my deposit. He ignored all of my emails and phone calls. He finally gets back with me 2 months after I moved out and has all this ridiculous made-up lies about how I damaged his unit. Broken blinds, scratches on the hardwood floor. He made it seem like I damaged his door by getting the lock replaced. He said there were scratches on the outside of his door, rust here and there, broken dishwasher, broken sink, oven was broken dryer. Literally all lies. I would never leave a unit in that condition. He sent me an itemized list for all the charges that magically came out to be $1,000, the same as my deposit. He was always planning to keep my money. He wanted that money to either ball on it or upgrade his condo. I hated him. I decided I wasn't going to go to court because I had moved to a different state and lived alone, but I thought of something. He rented to me under the table and likely didn't claim my rent payments as earned income. I had all my wire transfers on my bank statements. I had his routing and account number and a copy of his driver's license as we agreed to swap IDs when I signed the lease to make sure I wasn't getting scammed. I found his out-of-state address online, gathered all my bank statements, gathered his bank account numbers and made a report with the IRS, Internal Revenue Service. About a few years later, I checked up on things, and that lying man has lost his condo and lost everything he owned in bankruptcy. I paid for and downloaded his court records and saw proof that he lost everything including his condo and cars and had his bank account seized. I'm not sure if he has gone to jail or anything, but I'm so glad that he got his karma. He stole money from me that I gave him to rent a condo and he ended up losing that same condo to bankruptcy. Screw him and anyone who calls him a friend. He can rot for all I care. Today I was scheduled to receive a package but had to be out of the house today. Around 1 p.m. I get an alert from my Ring doorbell and see my neighbor taking the package from my steps. Now, I've never done more than exchange pleasantries, but I assumed she was trying to be polite and keep it from being stolen. Around 45 minutes later, I returned home and went over to collect my package. I politely asked for it and she claimed to have no knowledge of it. I truthfully couldn't believe my ears and asked again. But the entitled person denied it again. So I had to show her the video of her clearly taking it. How does she react? "How dare you record me without my consent? I am calling my lawyer." Then she slams the door in my face. At this point, I was furious and knocked on her door again, not so nicely. She didn't answer. I went home to put the file on a flash drive and planned to report her when there was a knock on my door. The cops. Now, I live in a pretty nice suburb, but I was still amazed the police got there within 20 minutes of that second knock. The entitled woman had called 911 saying that I had been recording her. I was beating down her door. It only took a few minutes for the officer in question to get to the bottom of what was going on. The entitled person had the nerve to rant and rave that she had been recorded without permission to the officer as she was being arrested. Her husband returned the item and the entitled woman had opened it and wrapped it to re-gift. He tried to get me to drop the charges, but I'm going to let it play out in court. I haven't seen her return home, so maybe she's still in the cell telling everyone how she was recorded without consent. Update. A few things have happened. The block captain with the neighborhood watch came by and asked some questions. Turns out that there have been a lot of such thefts in our neighborhood. The woman in question has been suspected in at least one of them, but no one has ever had any proof. We got one of the lock boxes for packages just to keep me safe. Lastly, it was an American Girl doll. So many people have asked. This is not my story, this is my mate's story. Well, let's call him by his nickname, Yuyud. Key players are Yuyud, pity, friendly, calm, helpful, willing to help anyone in need, respected by the staff and volunteers alike, the designated toxic handler, volunteer leader. Boss Aso. Smug, hates volunteers, degrading and hostile towards volunteers, blames the volunteers for everything that goes wrong. Important information: the hospital is powered by volunteers because it's a non-profit. Without them, the operation power goes cut by half. This story: it was 2020 and the height of the COVID-19 pandemic in Indonesia. Yuyud was volunteer at a local hospital and he was respected by the staff and volunteers alike for his friendly demeanor, calm temperament, and willingness to help anyone in need. He was also the designated toxic handler, the person everyone went to when they needed to rant about something, no matter how small. One day, a new supervisor named Boss Aso arrived at the hospital. He was from a different province, and he hated volunteers with a passion. As soon as he arrived, he began degrading the volunteers and chewing them out for even the smallest infractions, such as wearing t-shirts and jeans instead of the regulation uniforms, even though the volunteers' uniform only a red vest with their logo on it. Yuyud and the other volunteers were furious and confused. They didn't understand why Boss Aso was so hostile towards them. They were the ones doing all the hard work, keeping the hospital running smoothly. One day, Boss Aso saw Yuyud working on a broken computer in the staff office. He flew into rage and yelled at Yuyud, "Who let you up here? Get outside and do your volunteer stuff." Yuyud was furious. He went to the break room and told the other volunteers what had happened. Everyone was outraged. In the next week, 7 of the 13 volunteers quit. The malicious compliance. The remaining volunteers stopped doing all the extra things they had been doing, such as bringing lunch for the staff and checking the fleets of vehicles regularly. They also refused to fix any problems that weren't specifically listed in their job descriptions. Even the paperwork only done half because of the job description stated that the EMS need to fill the later half, making work a lot longer to be done. When the hospital manager noticed that the volunteers were gone and expenses were up, he called an emergency meeting. Boss Aso blamed the volunteers and Yuyud, but Yuyud had a surprise for him. He had a recording of Pasasu yelling at the volunteers and mocking them. Remember the toxic handler? Yeah, he uses his influence to secure the recording. The fallout. The manager was furious and he confronted Pasasu, who tried to deny everything, but the video evidence was undeniable. The manager demoted Pasasu to staff and destroyed his reputation. His reputation is ruined and he can't be promoted to a higher position anymore. If he quits, there will be a paper trail about his discrimination. I, 20 female, am a college student living in off-campus housing with 2 other girls. One of my roommates, Jen, 21 female, has been extremely difficult for me to live with. She was friends with my other roommate, Leah, 21 female, and we ended up living together. Among other issues, Jen eats mine and Leah's food constantly. At the start of the lease, back in August, there was little bits of food here and there, but now it's lots of food, and it's happening a lot. She constantly drinks my almond milk and routinely leaves a carton empty in the fridge. She has a history of depression, and despite having wealthy parents and multiple of their credit cards, I think she's too depressed to go to grocery shopping, so instead she's buying food for lunch when she's on campus for classes and eating mine and my other roommates' food to supplement. I am extremely frustrated. I have confronted her about this 3 times now, and last week I caught her in the act and immediately called her out on it. She broke down crying and said it would never happen again. I tried to level with her and told her to get Instacart, and even offered to give her a ride to the store, despite her also having her own car. The next day she ate one of my yogurt cups and a $5 cupcake from an expensive bakery in my city that my sister got me for my birthday. Jen has a soy allergy. She lets us know about it when we moved in together, and said he had no problem with us having soy products in the apartment as long as we properly seal the containers after using them. We've had soy sauce in the fridge all semester and leftover edamame a few times. No big deal. When I went to the grocery store on Tuesday, I decided to buy soy milk instead of the usual almond I bought all year, mostly because I wanted to change. But I'll be lying if I said it wasn't also because I wanted her to stop drinking my milk. The soy milk I bought is from the same brand as the almond milk I usually buy, because it's cheap and I like the products I've tried from this brand. Needless to say, the packaging looks similar. Yesterday when I got out of one of my classes, I had 5 missed calls from Jen. Turns out Jen grabbed my milk as usual and did not look at the packaging, which is insane because she literally opened the soy milk for the first time and had to break the seal, and she drank some of it. She ends up having a reaction using an EPI pin and going to the hospital just in case. She's okay, but she's very mad at me, said this is my fault and is threatening to call student legal service. I told her she's full of crap and she has no case against me, and it's her fault for eating food that isn't her and being too stupid to read labels despite having an allergy. The tension in my apartment is now at an all-time high and I'm extremely stressed. I don't know, am I the jerk here? And now some comments on the post. Someone saying you're not that jerk. How is it your fault that you bought yourself a plant-based beverage to drink? I'd love to hear her call to student legal. My roommate bought soy milk and I'm allergic to soy. No, she didn't offer me any, but it looked like the almond milks she always buys in. No, she never told me I could drink that or offer it to me either. Anyway, she has soy milk in the fridge and it was brand new, so I had to open it. No, I didn't read the label. It looks just like the almond she buys and I always drink, so I thought, are you laughing at me? Am I on speaker? Is everyone there laughing at me? Hello? Why aren't you talking to me? Yeah, it will go something like that. Another commenter says, you're not the jerk. Tell her if she stopped stealing food, this would never have happened. Then give her a bill for all the food of yours she has eaten and be sure to include transportation to the city to get the replacement cupcake. Call student legal first and tell them that she has been stealing and you bought milk for yourself only. She stole it and had an allergic reaction. The milk was clearly marked, it was never offered to her, and she had to break the seal on the package given her multiple opportunities to see she was eating something she was allergic to. I will personally mark all my food as contain soy in big black Sharpie markers. If she asks why, I'm adding soy for flavor as a salt replacement. A third commenter goes with, "Not the jerk, she should not have drank your milk that you buy under any circumstances. Even if she liked your milk, she should have seen that it was soy, not almond, because the milk is clearly labeled so people don't have allergic reactions and can safely drink the milk of their choice. Anyone with food allergies should read the labels on packaged food, especially if someone buys a different brand that has similar packaging to the brand that someone knows they are not allergic to, so that they don't have unnecessary allergic reactions if someone wants to try a different brand of product." A few years ago when I was in year 6, I got this teacher, let's call her Mrs. D. She absolutely hated my family, from my mom to my brother and by extension, me. Some context. Younger brother was in year 5 at this point, but in year 1, my mom began pushing for him to be referred. This teacher was one of several that lied and said he was tested and didn't have anything wrong. They had an unqualified teacher do this test on him, and then about a third of the staff backed her up. My parents had to go private and spent a lot, between a couple hundred and £1,000. We now know he's dyslexic and has ADD, which my mom also has, whilst my dad and several other members of our family have dyslexia. This teacher continued crap with my family, and after years I had her as my year 6 teacher. She hated me, despite the fact that I was a classic shy kid and didn't bother anyone. I had social anxiety and regularly get panic attacks, but she wouldn't let me leave the classroom. Mrs. D's torment continued for a total of 10 months, and after shouting at me in front of the class for missing the summer performance, I was at home throwing up for 3 days and had a temperature of 39 Celsius. It wasn't even like I had lines. We all just sang the songs and that was it. On the Monday of my final week in that school is when the assembly will happen. The week before the leavers assembly, my entire class is writing our speeches as we are all required. I completed mine and it had all the stereotypical boring stuff, but Mrs. D was out to get me and decided to rewrite the entire thing for me. Turns out she did this to most in my class, then rips up my speech in front of me. That Sunday night, my angry 11-year-old self wrote the most passive-aggressive speech in the history of speeches. I was out telling Mrs. D. I read it out to a room of my 30 classmates, all of our parents and grandparents, plus a bunch of my old teachers, and our head teacher. Everyone was filming and laughing. Then, at the back of the room, I saw the look of terror in her eyes. But I didn't stop and even showed the speech she wrote before ripping it up to shreds. At the end, I gave the reward to a classmate of mine before walking off the stage with the biggest smirk ever. Highlights include, thanks to Mrs. D, I now know that it's not what you know, but who you know. And I also said something about her judging my family yet being too busy with her phone to notice the fact that her children were running across the road unsupervised and 2 of them were nearly hit by a car when they suddenly ran in front of a car. I was walking by and saw it. Another is, I'm very grateful for some people and have a lot of respect for those people like Mrs. G and Mrs. M. Luckily for her, Mrs. D doesn't have to be burdened with that kind of stress. Or I'm sure everyone knows of the character, Mrs. Trunchbull. Thanks to Mrs. D, I was able to experience her in person. There was more, but I couldn't think of anything off the top of my head because it was about 6 years ago. Afterwards, I had parents and some teachers come up to me and congratulate me on my speech. One of the best moments of my life to this day. Edit. Before you say anything rude, please think about what you're going to post as you're saying this to an 11-year-old kid. Yes, I was kinda posh and acted mature for my age because of a lot of bullying that I dealt with. Edit 2. Since some people brought it up, I never saw her after year 6 until recently as my younger sister went there and she hugged me. I think realization hit her hard back then. When I came to school the next day, I became a sort of a legend all week and people from my primary school still bring it up. I never got in much trouble other than being told that I should have stuck to her speech for me.
And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.